Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This episode, we'll be talking, Gold Cup, craziness when it comes to Gold Cup. Megan Rapinoe, Pulisic to MLS, question mark. Mosse doppelgangers, World War I, and so much more. But first joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Monday, July 10th in the year 2023?
I am doing well. Excited for our second to last podcast in Los Angeles before departing for Australia.
Yes, as we mentioned last pod, there are already Fox folks down in Australia and New Zealand getting ready for this historic World Cup that's coming up. A lot of people leave this week, including you and myself and Rob Stone and Carly Lloyd and others. And we will be doing later on this week this kind of cross promotion of the end of the Gold Cup into the World Cup. And we'll be introducing our set down there in Sydney, I think on Sunday during the Gold Cup final. So we're excited about that. You watching anything, my friend?
All I've got is Rob Stone very generously gifted me a book about Michigan football that I've been reading the past few days, any free time I've had. I've also started packing for Australia. I know you're going to talk about that more on our next pod, but
Yeah.
all my good stuff is already in the suitcase, which is why I had to go deep into the rotation for this shirt.
Oh, but you've already got the stuff laid out and doing that.
Yes.
I did too. We'll get into that later on. All right, let's see what I watched. I think you'll appreciate this. You're the a historic type of guy. So two things, and I'm kind of going back. So you've probably already seen these, and many of you out there have already seen these. But I'm going back. I've just finished the 2010 miniseries, The Pacific. I don't know if you remember this. 10 episodes. It's kind of like the companion piece to Band of Brothers, if you remember that. Obviously, it focuses on the war in the Pacific as opposed to over in Europe, which was the Band of Brothers thing. Awesome. Loved it. And then I also watched They Shall Not Grow Old, which is a documentary by the great Peter Jackson about the First World War. And he went and took footage, archival footage, that either was public and a lot of it that was private. So this is the first time it's being seen. And he colorized it and, in certain instances, enhanced the viewing of the video and the pictures that they had, added a soundtrack of people talking and words taken out of diaries and accounts and all that kind of stuff. And it's a riveting account and documentary. It is a little weird when you start messing with history and enhancing history to create a documentary, which on the surface is supposed to be factual, right? But this his explanation and his justification was these young men that went to war, they lived the war in color. And just because we didn't have the technology to see it in color doesn't mean that now when we actually can put color to it, we don't do it. Even though there's no way that Peter Jackson or anybody doing this could ever know exactly what it looked like and what those colors were at the time.
I will definitely check that out. That sounds super interesting. You know, the one show that I have not watched yet that I'm going to have to watch when I get back from Australia, because like 20 different people in my life are imploring me to watch it, is The Bear.
Really?
Are you familiar with this
I've
program?
heard people talk about this. We have a new bear, right, on our show, too.
Chris Felica.
Yes.
The betting
indeed.
Insider.
Exactly. Welcome, Chris, to the Fox family. He will be with us through the end of this Gold Cup and then with us down in the Women's World Cup. So, yeah, bears everywhere. But, yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about this. This isn't the cocaine bear, though, right?
No.
Okay, got it. All right, ready to light this candle, my friend?
Let's do it.
All right, where should we start?
We'll begin with the Gold Cup. The semifinals are set. On Wednesday, the United States will face Panama in San Diego, while Jamaica will take on Mexico in Las Vegas. The winners will then meet Sunday at SoFi. We had an eventful weekend of quarterfinal action. The U.S. played in the last match, but we'll start with them. 1-1 draw against Canada after 90 minutes. Vasquez scored late. Vitoria equalized even later from the penalty spot. Then Schaffelberg gave Canada the lead in extra time, but a Scott Kennedy own goal made it 2-2. We went to penalties. Canada missed 3 of their 5. Matt Turner made a couple saves. The United States prevailed. They're off to their 12th straight Gold Cup semifinal. Your thoughts on this one?
Okay, so big picture. BJ and the Bear Cubs, as I'm calling them now, this is their get-out-of-jail-free card, because they should not have won this game in the way that they approached it and played it. They should have won this game because they're a better team, but they gave Canada every opportunity to win this game. And Canada, being the polite nation that they are, said, no, thank you. You can figure it out. And if not for the heroics of Matt Turner and Brandon Vasquez, this U.S. team would be going home, and completely justifiable. I will say that the first 45 minutes was the most boring half of soccer that I have seen in a long time. The lack of any type of cohesion and, at least on the surface, plan as to what they wanted to do manifested in a consistently, as I said, boring, but toothless type of attack. And the amount of passes backwards was mind-numbing and enraging to me. And you know a game is bad when we go to the highlights, and after the opening whistle, we go to the 78th minute. It was atrocious in the first half. And there are games that are like that, Mosse. We've all watched soccer for long enough to know there are games where it's just difficult to figure out. I don't think necessarily that this was one of those games. Yes, there's an element of breaking down the opposition that the U.S. had to do, and Canada was organized and was resilient in the way that they defended the U.S. But it, like I said, was incredibly infuriating and frustrating to see the U.S. constantly going backwards with their passes. And again, not in an effort to probe, but just in an effort in the way that it looked from the outside, where not only had they run out of answers, but I don't even think they had any answers to begin with.
The U.S. has a real problem on the wings right now. Morris is not fit. Kate Cowell is energetic but lacks any end product. Roldan and Gressel are good players who could help in other roles, but I don't see them as wingers at the international level. And then the big disappointment at this tournament has been Alex Zendejas, who was poor again. I don't want to keep beating up on this kid, but listen, it was a satisfying recruiting win, plucking a player from Liga MX who played for Mexico's biggest club, choosing the U.S. over Mexico. And I suppose he's probably better than he's shown in these 4 games. I suppose he's a nice depth piece to toss into the talent pool, but much too much was made of this acquisition. There were people that thought he was going to be a major impact player. This was a huge get. I never saw that, and to me, this tournament has confirmed that he is a nice player, but I don't see anything special there.
And not for lack of trying. 4 starts in a row. He has gotten ample opportunity against good competition, against poor competition. He has played, for the most part, on the right-hand side. Last night we saw him on the left-hand side. It's just, and again, to your point, I don't think it's necessarily that he's a bad player. And I also don't think it was not justified to go after him. But it might not be a situation where, at this point, he fits in the way that he plays. Gressel was disappointing. I thought Djordje Mihailovic was disappointing. As I mentioned, the back passing between and the constant looking backwards of Mihailovic and Sands and Busio. I thought that the only people that really stood out in terms of a positive were Jones on that left-hand side. And I actually thought Jesus Ferreira, and I know we can get into this Jesus Ferreira thing, but overall, in terms of his actual performance and the positive nature that he brought to the way that he played, I thought that he was pretty good. Jaden Neal struggled, and look, he's young and he's going to get better, but Jaden, at times, not only was he bad defending, but the thing that we kind of are impressed with, which is his ability to play out of the back and his composure, even at times that let him down. He had a couple of good passes, but it was not a good night for him either.
The center backs were very nervy. Miles Robinson committing 2 penalties, needless handballs, bailed out the one late in the first half because there was a push right before that. What did you make of that decision?
As I've said, it's 2023, and if you are a defender, I'm not saying I like it, but the reality is you have to find a way to defend with your arms behind your back.
But I mean, did you think the push was enough to negate the penalty?
No, the push was not enough. And again, this is why I say this is their get-out-of-jail-free card. The push on Busio was never, ever going to be called in any other situation. It was this out that the referee had. Was it a push? Yeah, but you could call it a push on every single corner kick, every single free kick.
On Vasquez, he's yet to start a game at this tournament. He has 3 goals in just over 100 minutes on the field. His minutes per goal ratio is actually better than Jesus Ferreira's at this tournament. And there are people arguing, I've heard this a lot in the last 24 hours, that when you consider who his goals have been against, Jamaica and Canada, that Vasquez is actually the player who should have raised the stock more than Ferreira at this tournament, because we're still litigating Jesus Ferreira and the value of his goals. Do you think there's an argument to be made that when you factor in level of opposition, that Vasquez is actually helping himself more than Ferreira in the long run?
It is, but when we talk about a Cade Cowell, for example, who came in a substitute capacity, and we talked to BJ Callahan, who said, look, at this point, Cade Cowell is a substitute. Why are we not saying the same thing now about Brandon Vasquez? Because he's coming into a game, and he's benefiting from tired legs and an openness at times, and he's doing his job, and that's wonderful to him. But does that mean that he should be the starter? He is a much more traditional type of 9 relative to Jesus Ferreira. So I get why that is. And look, I'm the one that last year said to Greg Berhalter, why the hell are you not at least taking a flyer on him and bringing him into a camp to see what he does? But I think that there is absolutely a case to be made for Brandon Vasquez to start going forward. But that also doesn't mean that Jesus Ferreira did not have a good game.
And it also doesn't mean he has to drop out of the lineup.
Right,
I like
true.
when they're on the field together. We've seen that throughout this tournament, and it's been pretty effective. So, as you mentioned, Ferreira can be effective in a different role than playing as a center forward.
Absolutely. If you're just judging it on goals, and let's be honest, the guy scored 2 hat-tricks in a row, so that's where his money and his gold was, then last night was a failure, if that's how you want to characterize it. But if I look at the Jesus Ferreira who's coming back and blocking crosses, the Jesus Ferreira who's coming back and playing out of the back, that little chip that he did, I can't remember what minute it was, but literally playing out of the back. And instead of bashing it 60 yards down the field, actually having the composure back in a position almost at right back at times, playing out of the back with a depth little chip over the top to his opponent that led the ability to come out of the back. All of those little things, yeah. Should he have stopped the goal ultimately that Canada scored down that left-hand side with a foul? Well, yeah, he was probably tired because he was running all over the place. I don't even know what position at a certain point he was playing. And this isn't me just blindly defending Jesus Ferreira. This is just looking at what he actually did in the game. And anybody who has a soccer brain that looks at that game, if you didn't know what Jesus Ferreira had done in the last 2 games, you would say, well, that's one of your better players out there. That's somebody that you need on the field, regardless of what the position is. That's somebody that you need on the field.
On Matt Turner, we had Doug McIntyre on the pregame show, and given the fact that Luton Town have declined to sign Ethan Horvath permanently, Doug expressed some concern that the top 4 U.S. goalkeepers, none of them are going to be starting at club level this upcoming season. Matt Turner, Zach Steffen, Ethan Horvath, and Gaga Slonina. Here's what I'll say about Turner. Until he gives you a reason to be concerned, I wouldn't be concerned. He didn't play that much this past season, and he still looks incredibly sharp for the U.S. Now, he might play even less this upcoming campaign because Arsenal qualified for the Champions League. They rotated in Europa League. They're not going to rotate in the Champions League. So if Ramsdale doesn't get hurt, it's going to be fewer opportunities for Turner. So maybe down the line, we might be concerned about this. But as of now, I have not seen any rustiness in his game during this Gold Cup.
He would have saved the Schaffelberg shot, too, if it hadn't been deflected. I guarantee you. He had that angle, and if you asked him, look, I have so much time for Matt Turner. He is not just a great soccer player, but just a wonderful person. And as I said on the show last night, he never takes for granted. You can tell he never takes for granted every single opportunity he gets to put on that jersey and go on the field for the U.S. And this is a guy who didn't grow up dreaming of this. And therefore, I think he has maybe a better appreciation in our zeal to create better soccer players from a younger age. What have we done, Mosse? We have created all of these different opportunities and resources and pathways now. But it also, in a certain sense, has given a very young player and a group of young players a sense of entitlement in that they are due this because at a young age they were identified, because at a young age they've gone into these incredible elite type of circumstances and surroundings. And Matt Turner, that's not what he has come from. And in a certain way, it might make him better. Ultimately, he's a goalkeeper, needs to save the ball. He has done that consistently, like you said. And right now, statistically, there's almost nobody better when it comes to penalties.
And he told Jenny Taft afterwards he was kicking himself over the Victoria penalty in regulation because he felt like Victoria was probably going to go down the middle. And at the last split second, Turner saw something in Vitoria's run-up that made him think that he was actually going to try to pick one of the corners, and so he jumped, and Vitoria scored down the middle. But you knew the next time, it was a fascinating mental game because you wondered, is Vitoria going to try this again? And if so, is Turner going to be fooled again? And no, Turner stood right in the middle of the goal, and it came right at him.
So while it was an incredibly boring and frustrating first half, second half picked up. Ultimately, it became one of the classic games that will be remembered for a long time. And I will give credit to BJ Callahan and this team for ultimately finding a way back. But again, the hole that you dug was unnecessary. Although in any World Cup, doesn't matter if you're the best team in the world or not, there are going to be peaks and valleys. There are going to be moments where stuff that you throw against the wall just doesn't stick. And it's just the soccer gods are not smiling on you. And you have to find a way, by hook or by crook, even if it's ugly, and even if it's not something that you're going to put in a time capsule, to get out of the mess like that. And they did.
And it was a very tense affair. There's a real edge to this rivalry right now. We had all sorts of scuffles during the game. We had a dispute between Matt Turner and Vitoria during the coin flip for the penalties. Then the players were arguing over where they should stand during the penalty shootout. Evidently, in the tunnel afterwards, there was some sort of altercation.
It was great. I mean, for a seemingly incredibly nice and kind and beautiful country that Canada is. As we take a look at, some of the scenes that were going on and off the field, this was a whole Donnybrook. This was a back and forth, and there were, egos and tempers and all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, take off, you hosers. You lost. And you lost, I think, to a team that of late and of the last couple of years you have felt you have caught up to, at least in the fullest sense of your national team, which we know this wasn't. But this is the younger brother type of situation here, where Canada is dying to find a way past. And in that moment, they thought they had it. And the U.S. just reached in and said, not so fast, little brother. That's not going to happen. And crushed their Canadian hopes and dreams in the process.
When Mexico played the U.S. in the Nations League semis, and there were all those scuffles in that game, we did a post-game show right afterwards. I hopped on the Zoom before you did, and Kiara was the only one on there, and I asked her what she thought of the game, and the first thing she said was, I like the fighting.
Oh.
And Sean Sullivan was texting me excitedly this morning about this fight. There's a younger generation, I'm lumping Sean and Kiara as part of the same generation, that loves this kind of stuff. It makes the game more entertaining for them.
Well, it's the bloodlust. It's the human element that has, for now a couple of generations, tried to have been sucked out because, we can't have any of that. And what does it say about us as individuals or as a society, as a culture? Humans are humans. Humans are going to human, Mosse. When they see blood, when they see fighting, it hits you in a primal way, and you shouldn't have to apologize for it. And if and when you try to tamp it down, for a little bit it can stay in the recesses, but eventually it's going to come out.
So next up for the U.S. is Panama on Wednesday. Panama, impressive so far at this Gold Cup. They hammered Qatar 4-0 on Saturday. Ismael Diaz with a hat-trick. He's up to 4 goals, second to Jesus Ferreira in the Golden Boot race. Panama well managed by Thomas Christensen. They did have a big injury miss. Michael Murillo is out of this tournament, so they had to play Barcenas as that right wing back, which pushed Quintero into the starting lineup, part of that front three with Diaz and Fajardo. You've got Godoy and Carrasquilla in the midfield, Harold Cummings anchoring that back line. Good team. Should be a good test for the U.S.
It should be, but I'm not as worried about this game, to be quite honest. Yes, Panama will capitalize, and more so than Canada, on the mistakes that the U.S., if they make the same mistakes against Panama. But I think that the wake-up call that this game against Canada will really serve them well going into this Panama game. So I was much more worried about the Canada game than I am now about the Panama game. And so that they came out with all those lessons, and whether it's a Jalen Neal or a Jordi Mihailovic or anybody that had kind of been strutting around and feeling good about themselves, this was almost a needed slap in the face that, hey, you have got to show up, and you're not playing St. Kitts and Nevis anymore. You're not playing Trinidad and Tobago anymore. This is a whole nother step, and the shit that you got away with maybe in the last couple of games, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. And maybe this team individually and collectively needed that, and maybe BJ Callahan needed that.
U.S. and Panama played in 2 Gold Cup finals, 2005, 2013. U.S. won both, 0-5 on penalties. And now they meet in the semis, so another chapter in this rivalry should be a good one. The other semi I mentioned, Jamaica, Mexico. Mexico beat Costa Rica 2-0 in the quarters, both goals in the second half. Pineda from the penalty spot, and then Eric Sanchez. What did you make of El Tri's performance?
I mean, ultimately, I thought that well, first off, I think this was the best that we've seen Costa Rica, and none of us have been impressed with Costa Rica. And I still don't think Costa Rica is a great team, and that does not bode well for the future when it comes to qualifying for 2026. But I also think that Mexico was patient enough and good enough to ride this one out, and they recognized that it was going to kind of be a slog. And ultimately, they got, the moment that they needed penalty-wise, but they just kept knocking on the door, and eventually Costa Rica couldn't keep them out.
Jamaica beat Guatemala 1-0 Sunday in Cincinnati. Amari Bell, a teammate of Ethan Horvath's at Luton Town last season, scored the goal early in the second half. This was a better win than it might appear because it was a massive Guatemalan crowd. Felt like a home game for them. Incredible atmosphere. And Jamaica weathered the storm. They got the result. I've been very impressed with them throughout this Gold Cup. Jamaica, Mexico, I think it's pretty close to a 50-50, maybe slight edge Mexico, but would not surprise me at all if the Reggae Boys won that one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be close. And again, this Jamaican team is a absolute work in progress, and the parts are all there. And it still remains to be seen whether in this Gold Cup they're able to put it all together. But if you extrapolate it out, so if I was to ask you right now, keep in mind the U.S., Mexico, and Canada are not having to qualify for 2026. Right now, with what you are seeing, both in the moment and maybe again, extrapolating it out to what they will become the qualifying process in, I guess it would be 25. Who would your 3 be that you think are going to automatically qualify? And keep in mind that there's a potential for another 2 going into the playoffs. But let's just say those 3 right now. Who are your favorites?
Jamaica and Panama would be 2 of them.
Okay. And then that third one?
Oof.
Because it goes down to, your El Salvador and your Costa Rica and even
Honduras.
Honduras, Guatemala, these types of teams that are all going to kind of fight it out. And that's just assuming that this Jamaica team kicks on, so things can happen.
I'll say Costa Rica just because they have that pedigree,
Okay.
although I agree with you. I'm not overly impressed by the talent they have coming up.
Okay. But anyway, this is, there are opportunities, and there will be opportunities, additional opportunities that we haven't seen for some of these teams. What else, Mosse?
Some transfer news. Brendan Aronson's move to Union Berlin is official on loan from Leeds, while Christian Pulisic, as we discussed, is headed to AC Milan. We chatted about that on our pregame show this weekend, and Landon Donovan had some absolutely fascinating remarks about Pulisic's decision to go to AC Milan from Chelsea. Let's take a listen to them right now.
So World Cup's coming in 3 years. This is once in a lifetime. He's going to be in the prime of his career, his life as a soccer player, his earning potential. I'm sure he's making plenty of money. But the ability to come to MLS, kind of like Messi did, I'm not so sure that wasn't a big reason for Messi, the World Cup coming here. And I think it would have been a great move, not just because it's my former team that I love, but the Galaxy to go out and get Christian and bring him here and pay whatever you have to pay him. Pay whatever you have to pay him. Bring a global, well, not a global, but a American superstar who has global recognition back to MLS ahead of the World Cup. I think it would have been a great move, and I can hear the Twitterverse going crazy and telling me I'm an idiot.
So the upside for Christian is, we obviously know the upside for MLS.
Well, here's my biggest thing. He needs to play, right? And I know we all said when he went to Chelsea, yeah, he's going to play. He didn't play a lot, right? Especially last year. At Milan, I would think he's going to play a lot, but you just don't know. And right, so leading into the World Cup, what if he spends the last 6 months leading into 2026 like he did this year? Then what happens? He's not playing a lot, and he's not in good form going into the World Cup.
All right. So much to unpack here when it comes to Landon's comments.
Landon did say in that clip that the Twitter sphere would call him an idiot. He is correct about that. That has, in fact, occurred.
Well, you know what? Get in line. So a couple of things. Actually, I had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago, because while I agree with Landon, and I did on air, that this would have been something the likes of which that we haven't seen when it comes to Major League Soccer. And it would have planted a flag and announced intention and ambition and a change that would have been unprecedented. What I think Landon's concern about him not playing, while is legitimate, I don't think that AC Milan is bringing Christian Pulisic to Milan with with the notion that he is just just nice to have. He's coming there to start, and I do think if he can stay healthy, and that's a big if given his history, he is going to start and he is going to play. My question back to Landon in that segment later on was, do you think, because as he knows, people are going to chirp, and Landon actually lived the criticism and the accusations that he was letting himself and the country and the national team down by lowering his expectations by playing in Major League Soccer. What gets lost in it is that Landon Donovan was fine at the World Cup playing in Major League Soccer. But I asked this question to Landon, and I ask it to our viewers and our listeners. Do you think that a Christian Pulisic spending the next 2 years, 3 years playing in Major League Soccer, is that the best version of Christian Pulisic that the national team would get and therefore America would get? Now, Christian Pulisic and Landon Donovan, there are similarities, but I think there's a lot of differences. And it's obvious that Christian Pulisic did not want to do that. But I would hope that MLS would have at least lobbed a call in and felt it out to see if there was a possibility of doing it. And it would be very different than a Messi type of situation. This would be a player in his prime spending big money, which MLS does do it on occasion, but it's mostly for foreign players coming in. This would be going and getting an American star, an established American star in the prime of his career, getting ready for a World Cup, spending what would have to be historical amounts of money to bring him in. And what would that signify in terms of the intention? Do you think you would still get the best version?
Well, first off, let me just say, when we discussed this move, I said Pulisic would slot in very nicely on the right wing for AC Milan. Stefano Pioli is now making noises about playing him as a number 10, which would be interesting. But look, I love Landon. I've really enjoyed working with him. He's long overdue for a guest appearance on this podcast.
Yes.
He keeps asking me about it, but we never book him. Sean Sullivan needs to get on that.
But not Matt McConaughey.
Matt Damon,
Damon.
Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah.
Exactly.
Our apologies to Landon Donovan. We'll get him on next time. But he's nuts here because, look, MLS, while still holding these long-term ambitions of being the greatest league in the world, even they've realized that for now they need to play the game, so to speak, and they've embraced being this selling league for Americans. So in this time where all the other top American players are playing in Europe, it would be completely bizarre for Christian Pulisic at 24 years old, when he could be playing for an AC Milan, to choose to come back to MLS. When you made that decision in '96, it was a whole bunch of you together making that decision. To me, this would be...
But why is it... So it's just bizarre because he would be the only one? You don't think that he might, that his decision might not influence others? So I don't understand why it would be bizarre.
Because, look, I know your feelings of American exceptionalism sometimes bump with the realities of the landscape of the footballing world and where MLS resides in it.
Answer the question, okay?
Because a player of Christian Pulisic's caliber should be playing in one of the top leagues in the world against the top players from all the other countries.
But
I think
why? But why should he be playing in one of those?
Because I think that's the best way for him to get the best out of his talent.
Because you don't think that you would get the best out of him if he was playing in Major League Soccer.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And that's where we fundamentally disagree, in that I don't necessarily think that Christian Pulisic playing for the LA Galaxy week in and week out in Major League Soccer, all right, wouldn't be able to get the best out of him. How does Landon Donovan playing in MLS score in 2002 and have a hell of a World Cup in 2002? How does Eddie Pope or Brian McBride or Frankie Haydock, or the list goes on and on? How is it possible that these players that are playing in Major League Soccer are able to function at the international level? How is it possible, Mosse, that last night in that game, a player like Mr. Jones out there on the left-hand side had no problem playing in the international game, but a player like, I don't know, Mr. Reynolds out there on the other side had some problems doing it? If it's just having your feet in Europe.
Well, you're reducing it to specific examples. I'm saying by and large, I think in any activity you undertake in life, you're going to get better doing it if you're practicing against a higher level of opposition, no?
But you, in that statement, you are assuming that that by playing in Major League Soccer, you are not, and that you are not getting better, and that you are not in an environment that is going to make you better. Keep in mind, this is also an environment that is structured radically differently than anything that exists over Europe. And so the competition, when we say competition, is very different in a single entity, is very different in a manufactured parity type of situation that doesn't exist around. So when we're judging those players, we're judging them also by the system and the situation that they are in.
What about just a prestige standpoint? Shouldn't a player of Christian Pulisic's caliber want to play for the most glamorous teams and the most glamorous leagues in the world?
There you go. Because if he doesn't, then somehow he is, again, betraying himself, betraying the game, betraying you, betraying the country by not challenging himself at what you think is the biggest and the best level, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It is fascinating, by the way, that Landon Donovan is the one making this point, given the choices he made in his career, which, by the way, he seems completely at peace with. And so, yeah, that's why I'd love to have him on and talk to him.
And in doing so, he became arguably the greatest American male soccer player ever to play the game. And I know there's people out there that are sitting in their cars or on their run or whatever they listen to this pod and saying, yeah, but think of what he could have been. Maybe he became the best version of himself because he knew, I'm talking about Landon Donovan, that this was going to enable him to be the best version of himself. And maybe MLS actually didn't stunt him, didn't hurt him in the long run. Maybe MLS actually made him the player that he is.
You know, we don't like to think of Landon Donovan as being that old, but actually it's been a while since he was making that decision in the mid-2000s. And so, yeah, maybe each case is different, but also each era is different.
Jesus Ferreira right now, I mean, the crapping on Jesus Ferreira is only relative to the fact that he plays in MLS. Because, again, if Jesus Ferreira was doing the exact same thing someplace else, it would not even be close to the criticism and the perspective that people have and the perception that people have of him. All right. Anyway. All right, Mosse, anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we have a special guest. Laken Litman's going to join us. Okay, welcome back. As we mentioned, we have a special guest on the show this episode. Laken Litman, the college football and soccer analyst, joins us. She's getting ready to head down with all of us to Australia and New Zealand to cover the Women's World Cup. We mentioned, last week about the continual content that she puts out, including a great article about the passing on of the torch and the ideology and all that of the women's national team and how that has led to success and growth both on and off the field. Welcome, Laken, to the State of the Union. Before we get into this with you, we don't want to bury the lead because the great Megan Rapinoe has informed us that this is it. She's calling it quits at the end of this year when it comes from an NWSL and professional soccer perspective, and obviously this would be her last World Cup. So let's hear from the great Megan Rapinoe as she announced her retirement at the end of this year.
It's with a really deep sense of peace and gratitude and excitement that I want to share with you guys. This is going to be my last season, my last World Cup and my last NWSL season. Obviously, there'll be more to come further down the road after hopefully we get done what we want to get done. I could have just never imagined where this beautiful game would have taken me. I feel so honored to be able to have represented this country and this federation for so many years. It's truly been the greatest thing that I've ever done.
Okay, so Laken, can you kind of put into context for us what Megan Rapinoe has meant to not just the U.S. Women's National Team, but to soccer? And more importantly, because I love to say, Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? She's been incredible, but she's heading into a World Cup, and what she means to this team now come next week when they kick off this World Cup.
Well, first, Megan Rapinoe has been everything and more for not just, as you said, not just women's soccer, but for all women's sports, for all athletes, for all people. It's not just her creativity and talent on the pitch. Of course, we remember what she did 4 years ago. She won the Golden Boot, the Golden Ball, all while carrying the team on her shoulders. Of course, she's been an outspoken leader on topics such as LGBTQ rights, racial inequality, voter rights, diversity. Of course, she was one of the faces of the equal pay fight that the U.S. won. So she's just meant everything. And heading into this World Cup, it's been talked about ad nauseum that she has a different role heading in. She's 38 years old, just turned 38 last week. She's going to be coming off the bench rather than, winning the Golden Boot this year. But she's okay with that. It's kind of sort of like the role that Abby Wambach played in the 2015 World Cup, where, this prolific scorer, this legendary athlete, and now she's on the bench coming into games. And that's kind of what Rapinoe is going to be for the US. And Vlatko told her he needs her. He needs her experience. He needs her leadership. And of course, so do all of her teammates. After she announced her retirement, players were, crying in the mixed zone, and Rapinoe herself was holding back tears. So you just know what this team means and what this World Cup means to her and to the whole U.S. women's national team.
Yeah, Laken, the U.S. women just named their captains for this World Cup, a move necessitated by the injury to Becky Sauerbrunn, and it's going to be Alex Morgan and Lindsey Horan. I found it mildly interesting that Rapinoe wasn't one of the captains. Is that because she's not going to spend that much time on the field, so Vlatko thought it would be weird to have a sub be one of the captains?
That's probably a good point, but I think that one of the things that Lindsey and Alex and Vlatko and even Megan have said is this team is just full of leaders. You could have gone so many different ways with captain. You could have done Crystal Dunn. You could have had Julie Ertz, even though, of course, she just recently came back to the team. There's just leaders all over the pitch. And I think that just because Lindsey Horan and Alex Morgan were the ones who were named captain, there are so many captains on this team. Even there are young players stepping up and taking on leadership roles and vocal roles. And I think we saw yesterday during the send-off game, you could just see Rapinoe on the bench. She didn't play. Anytime the players were coming over to the sideline, she is there holding 2 water bottles, like ready to go. She's talking to her teammates on the bench. While she's on the bench, she's talking to them on the field. I don't think she needs the title. I think she is just a leader and everybody knows it.
Laken, we were on air last night with Landon Donovan when we were talking about this announcement, and he made a point of saying that he felt an incredible release and relief when he announced his retirement ahead of time. What the timing of this, because from the outside, it looks like in this moment that Megan Rapinoe is, I think to some, and I think this is a fair criticism, making it about herself before the World Cup. What do you think about the timing? And do you think that there was, I'm sure there was thought, but do you think ultimately this is going to be a distraction or it's problematic? I believe that she probably should have waited till after the World Cup to do something like this, but she obviously felt that this was necessary for her to do now.
Yeah, I would counter and just say that it actually makes it less of a distraction because she announced it before the World Cup, because now she can totally focus on being the leader and player that her team needs her to be this summer. I'm sure everybody on the team knew this was coming. She said she's known for a year that she was going to do this. So to have it hanging over everybody's head before they try and make history and try and three-peat, which obviously no men's or women's team has ever done, I think that it actually just, gets it out of the way. Now they can focus. They're done with their media obligations. They're done with press conferences for a while, at least until we all get down there. But they're about to, when they land tomorrow, I guess, they took off last night after the game, they will just be with themselves and they don't have to talk about anything else. She doesn't have to say, bring Alex Morgan aside and say, hey, what do you think? When should I, announce my retirement? Things like that. I feel like they don't have to even think about anything other than winning another World Cup.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, by the time you're listening to this, the U.S. women's national team will have landed in New Zealand, getting ready for their group stage games, which, by the way, will all occur in New Zealand. Let's spin it a little forward. And coming off of this send-off game, they win 2-0 against Wales. What did we learn and what didn't we learn from this? And we've all seen send-off games. Sometimes there is stuff to be learned, and a lot of times there isn't.
I think what we learned is that Trinity Rodman is ready for this big stage. we kind of weren't really sure. We've heard for, I guess, really a little more than a year now that she is going to be the next big U.S. women's star. And we hadn't really seen that even just as recently as the She Believes Cup, which was in February. Vlatko had been talking about how, Trinity just needs to find that relentlessness. And we had kind of seen it in the NWSL, her playing for the Washington Spirit. She's been in really great form, but for whatever reason, when she comes into training camp for the national team, her form dips. And, we've talked to her about it. She's very honest when she talks to the media. She was nervous coming into this environment, is intimidating, something she's always wanted to do her whole life. And now she's here and, it's on her to grab the moment. When Mallory Swanson went down in April and with her injury, everybody was wondering, okay, well, who's going to step in and fill that role? Vlatko called in Alyssa Thompson, but everybody, I think, was kind of wondering, okay, when's Trinity Rodman gonna kind of make her case? And Alyssa Thompson started the game yesterday. Trinity Rodman comes in at halftime and scores 2 goals. And she just kind of looked like that super strong, outrageously skilled player that we all know that she is.
Yeah, Laken, that has been the one big lineup question going into this World Cup. Who's going to be that third forward alongside Alex Morgan and Sophia Smith? Is it going to be Lynn Williams? Is it going to be Trinity Rodman? Someone else? Do you think Trinity took a big step yesterday? If you had to bet right now, do you think she'll emerge as that starter at the World Cup?
If I had to bet, I would say yes. I mean, it's going to be interesting during this group stage because it's going to give Vlatko a chance to kind of try out a bunch of things, especially given that their first opponent is Vietnam. I wouldn't take too much into account with, I feel like he'll probably start his true lineup in that first match, but probably make quite a few subs and get people some playing time and get some younger players, that experience and make them comfortable. I think the Netherlands will be a huge, in the second match, I think that will be a huge insight into kind of what Vlatko's thinking for the rest of the tournament as far as who is going to be that main person that's starting up there with Sophia and Alex. And I would say Trinity has made a strong case.
Last question on the U.S. team, and then let's broaden it out to the rest of the field here. You mentioned, some questions when it comes to this starting lineup. Julie Ertz didn't play yesterday, but there was the potential for her not only to play, but to play back, I guess, to her humble beginnings at center back, given some of the question marks. Do you think, first off, Julie Ertz is going to start come this World Cup? And secondly, where on the field do you think she's going to start?
I think she is going to start. After the game yesterday, Vlatko was asked that question directly, what's up with Julie Ertz? And he said if this was a World Cup match, she would have played. So that makes me believe that on July 21st, she will get the starting nod. Where is still very tricky because we saw Alana Cook and Naomi Girma start at center back together yesterday for the first time in about a year. I think she's going to kind of play that both defensive midfield and center back, just kind of maybe depending on the opponent. I wouldn't be surprised if she started in the midfield, kind of where she left off in 4 years ago. But I think that there are definitely certain games where Vlatko could sub her in for where Alana Cook played and maybe play her alongside Naomi Girma.
Laken, in terms of other contenders, had England been completely healthy, I think most people would have viewed them as co-favorites alongside the U.S., but minus Beth Mead, Fran Kirby, Leah Williamson, do you think there's still enough there to win a World Cup, or does England have to lower their expectations a bit?
I mean, they still have Lucy Bronze, Chloe Kelly, who scored the game winner in the Euros last year, Millie Bright. I think that they're pretty deep, just like the U.S. I mean, people could say the same thing, the U.S. lost Mallory Swanson. They don't have Becky Sauerbrunn. Can they still win? I think that England is a strong team, and we've seen them kind of been coming up for the last several years, even before the Euros. And the injuries, those really stink. They're so unfortunate, but this seems like a team that is really poised to make a run, and I would definitely not count them out just because they have a handful of injuries.
All right. So other than England, give us your very quick Cliff Notes version when it comes to who everyone should be watching. Who do you think has a chance? Everyone always asks when we have experts on, give me a dark horse going forward, and maybe some stories that people aren't aren't expecting that are going to crop up when it comes to either on or off the field, given this unique and historic World Cup that we're about to see?
Sure. Well, I think some maybe dark horse candidates to make a run, Spain, which I think we remember this was actually the US's toughest match 4 years ago. Before they played France in the semifinal, they had to beat Spain in the round of 16. And they only did that thanks to a late Megan Rapinoe penalty kick. I'm not sure if people remember that, but we know that Spain has been in the news because of an unfortunate dispute, with their federation and their head coach and so many players sitting out, and they beat the US last fall with their B team. But even so, they have reigning Ballon d'Or winner Alexi Lalas is back, and they're on the same side as the US of the knockout bracket. So that could be a very tough match for the US, and who knows, maybe Spain could get on a run. Another team is Australia. I mean, you can't discount the co-hosts and that home soil. We've seen record ticket sales, 80,000 rowdy Australian fans in a stadium. I mean, if the US were to play them, that wouldn't be until the final, and 80,000 plus fans rooting against the US won't phase them, but excuse me, it could phase somebody else. And of course, they have Sam Kerr, one of the best players in the whole world. Maybe some people don't know that, but they soon will find out. And I don't know, you can't ever count out Sweden. You can't ever count out France. The Netherlands, of course, the US played them in the final in 2019, and now they have to play them in the group stage. They're missing one of their best players, Vivian Miedema, but they still have a very talented and experienced roster. So, they'd love nothing more to get revenge from 2019.
Laken, your colleague Doug McIntyre is picking Germany as his dark horse, which is ridiculous. They've had some shaky friendly results, lost to Zambia, close win over Vietnam. How do you see Germany at this World Cup?
Yeah, well, at least they have Alexandra Popp back. She missed the Euro final last year. But yeah, they have a couple injuries too. No team is free of injuries, first of all. So, Germany, of course, has some, unfortunately. But like you mentioned, they lost to Zambia. They only beat Vietnam 2-1 back in June, who, of course, the U.S. plays in its opening match. They lost to Brazil in April. They're definitely looking pretty shaky. But as we saw yesterday, the U.S. first half against Wales, 0-0 at halftime, kind of got off to a slow start before, coming out with the 2-0 result. I don't know. I think a lot of people are picking Germany to make a run, and I wouldn't be surprised because, of course, they've been on this stage before. They know what to expect. They're not the type of team that gets intimidated by much. So, despite injuries, despite some shaky tune-up matches, I wouldn't be surprised. But I personally think it's going to be a U.S.-England final.
Ooh, that would be tasty. Oh,
I know.
3 in a row, history. Unprecedented, never been done before, men's or women's, and not only that, through England. Oh, my goodness, that would be beautiful. Listen, Laken, before we let you go, I mentioned Landon Donovan. I've been going around this past week because he came in the other day to the studio and had a question for us, and you are the perfect person to ask this question to, given your college football background. He did not go to college. He took the pathway of going straight to the pros, and so he missed out on that college experience. And so he asked me this fall, he wants to go to a college football game, and he wants it to be the best possible experience from start to finish, whether it's the tailgating and the community and the city or village, whatever it's in, to the actual game on the field, to the post-game celebration, all that kind of stuff. So if you had to send him to one college game, which one do you think it would be?
LSU, Alabama, always. That is the number one, and specifically in Baton Rouge, because tailgating and night games in Death Valley, like literally nothing can beat that in college football, in my opinion. They are on another level at LSU. And of course, those are heated rivals, and that's what I recommend to literally everybody. I used to actually cover Alabama. I was an Alabama beat writer earlier in my career, and I've been to that game in Baton Rouge a couple of times, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, my goodness. All right, well, plug your stuff, because I know you got some interesting stuff coming about from Sophia and a thing about moms, right?
Yeah. So I think tomorrow, which I guess is Tuesday. So I have a story about Sophia Smith, and just she's this competitive freak. All she thinks about is winning. She said at Media Day, I love this quote, "It makes me sick to lose anything, like card games, anything. I'm a winner." And she just says it so matter-of-factly. And then the following week, leading up to the US's first match at the World Cup, I'm going to have a story about soccer moms. And I spoke with some of the OGs like Joy Fawcett and Carla Overbeck, and kind of what things were like back then in the 90s for them compared to what things are like now for Alex Morgan, Crystal Dunn, Julie Ertz, the three moms who are going to be on the US team.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we are so excited and happy to have you on board. Again, Laken Litman, the college football and soccer analyst, and I have anointed her the purveyor of awesomeness, and so that's what she's going to be doing. We will see you down under. Can't wait to see all the content, all the stories, all the stuff that you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the State of the Union, and have a safe trip down there.
Thank you so much for having me, and you guys have travel safe too.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. All right, welcome back. Thank you to Laken Litman. She was wonderful, really interesting stuff, and she's a great writer, and we're glad to have her with us and with our coverage. All right, Mosse, it's time for Ask Alexi, right? So keep in mind that if you want to send a question in, use that hashtag #AskAlexi. You can do it on all our different social media platforms out there. And also keep in mind that our handle is SOTU with Alexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297. That is 657-549-2297. What do we have this week, Mosse?
Let's start with a voicemail. Let's take a listen right now.
Hey guys, I'm Juan Hernandez from Holland, Michigan, currently calling out of Panama City, Florida. I love the pod. I'm a longtime listener. However, I have never watched the State of the Union podcast. As such, I have no idea what David Mosse looks like. We all know what Alexi looks like from watching his coverage of U.S. games. Based on listening to you, Mosse, I have the image in my head that you look like Roberto Martinez, the former Belgium and now Portugal manager. Without the fine suits, of course. I would love to hear from you guys as to who is Mosse's doppelganger. Maybe then I can bring myself to look up a picture of David Mosse, the soccer savant and Fox Soccer research and writer extraordinaire. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, Juan. Holland, Michigan. Oh, my goodness. My neck of the woods over there in Michigan, the other side of the state. Actually, I was at a July 4th party, and Kennedy, who you might know from Fox News and our Fox family over there, I was at her house, and she's getting ready to do an appearance and a show over in Holland, Michigan. We were talking about Holland, Michigan. It's actually easier to fly into Chicago to get to Holland, Michigan than to Detroit. But wonderful question, because it hits on something that's important. First off, why aren't you watching the show? All right? Whether it's on YouTube or all the video that we put out there, there is a way to watch the show. And what I have found, Mosse, that there is a lot of people that actually watch the show. So they know what you look like. But Juan, and maybe others, I'm sure there's others out there, that don't know. He said that he thought you looked like who?
Roberto Martinez. Interesting.
So last night, I was with my my wife, and I asked her this question because I knew this was coming. And we started to kind of, think. And at one point, I had my phone with a picture of you, and we would hold it farther away and kind of out of focus to try to get somebody that reminded me of David Mosse. Now, this is an older picture, but this was what we were kind of basing it on. And so I came up with 4 different comps, if you will, lookalikes, if you will. They're not perfect because there's only one David Mosse. Thankfully, they broke the mold. Let's see. Let's put up a couple here. I don't know what the order is when it comes to this. All right, so this is Brendan Fraser. Now, Brendan Fraser in his natural state now, as opposed to when he was a teen idol and a up-and-coming actor, or in his recent starring of The Whale. So that's not it. Now, this was just the start of what we were looking at. Then I moved on to some other things. So maybe a Brendan Fraser. That's Jarek Jeter, right? You know this guy?
Correct.
Baseball player,
Yeah.
right? Famous baseball player. And wait, he's with the family now. He's with the Fox family now, from what I hear.
That is correct, yeah.
So Derek Jeter, Mosse's got a little Derek Jeter in him, absolutely. Then we move on to, all right, so this is an older type of reference. This is a guy named Peter Lorre, or maybe Lorre, I don't know, but he was in the Maltese Falcon, famous actor. This is, a black and white type of version of him. And then I'll finish it up here with the great Vince Vaughn. So I think you are all of these things. And even then, there is no perfect way to let somebody know who has never seen you what you look like. You're a good-looking man, my friend. And by the way, I should say that over the last couple of years, from a fitness standpoint, you have physically changed, and you are looking wonderful. Not that you weren't wonderful before, but you are looking wonderful and healthy. I know you've lost weight. I know you've been working out, and so this is, I don't know if this is the best version of you, but this is a wonderful version of you that we are seeing right now.
When you said Derek Jeter, Kiara almost fell off the couch over there, so that's probably not a great sign.
She doesn't think that it applies. Well, listen, there are people out there that know what you look like. And so please send in if you believe that you have the doppelganger, if you have that lookalike out there that is David Mosse. And, there are pictures of you out there on the internet. People can figure it out. If you look up David Mosse, you can find plenty of pictures of him. And go out there. There's even some apps that do this for you, but I didn't have the time nor the inclination to sign up for that. But thank you, Juan Hernandez from Holland, Michigan, now over in Florida, for listening to the pod. You should check it out on video too, because there's a whole other layer and aspect of the pod when you're actually watching it as opposed to just listening to it. What else we got?
All right, we have a couple of Twitter questions. This is Twitter, not Threads. We haven't moved on to that yet. We're doing Twitter
I'm on
still.
Threads. Alexi_Lalas. There we are. It's a kinder and gentler type of thing, allegedly.
All right, at John is online. What do you think about, quote unquote, Americans that want U.S. women to lose because they don't support their political views?
So we're getting ready for the World Cup, the Women's World Cup. And anytime that happens, in particular with the Women's World Cup, they have traditionally and have a long-standing use of this incredible platform and the megaphone that they have to voice their opinions on everything, including politics. And I have long gotten over that, in that I think that those that are almost hate-watching when it comes to the U.S. women's national team, and there will be those that tune in specifically in the hopes that Megan Rapinoe and company, because of things that they have said, ultimately lose. I think those people are letting their political differences limit the amount of fun and joy and pride that they have in their life. And I think that they are mistakenly and naively equating the success that this team or any team has on the field in sports as some sort of validation or some sort of justification for and of an athlete's politics. Because let's be honest, Mosse, if we only watched and supported athletes that we agree with, we wouldn't watch sports. There's what we know, and there's a whole lot of stuff that what we don't know. And there's many that argue that we shouldn't know any of that. I have no problem with athletes expressing their political opinions. And yeah, it might not be prudent relative to their, what we would call them now, brands or their business interests. But, athletes are members of the community. And with their opinions, while those opinions, they shouldn't be more important simply because they're athletes. They also shouldn't be any less important simply because they're athletes. And politics, by the way, in many countries and cultures, politics is sport. I remember growing up in Greece. I'll never forget walking with my mother when I was really young. And we were walking by a taverna, a tavern where these old Greek men were all together with their worry beads and drinking coffee and screaming and yelling at the top of their lungs back and forth. And it scared me. And I asked my mother, why are they so angry? What's going on? And she explained to me, no, they're not angry. They're talking about politics. And their voice, even though it might not be as informed as a political leader or someone that is immersed in politics 24/7, it's no less of a voice, and their opinion should be no less. And that's the way that I look at it when it comes to the politics impacting how you ultimately watch sports. And so that's what I think of those, quote, Americans that this summer tune in and watch this U.S. women's national team go for an unprecedented third World Cup in a row.
When you asked Laken about Megan Rapinoe's legacy, right away she went there. A big part of her legacy is the stances she's taken on different issues, gender equality, racial discrimination, etc. So for better or for worse, it is a big part of what we associate with her. So yeah, that is going to influence how people view her.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the package, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Megan here on my one for the roads, but I think we have another question, right?
Yep, another Twitter question, at DJ Swanger asks, is it an American thing to have so many fans who view the sport strictly through the lens of the national team?
I think it is an American thing. I don't know if it's uniquely an American thing. You can speak to it when it comes to Brazil and other countries and cultures, but I do think that our unique American soccer history and culture, and that involves the fact that soccer has not been king, the fact that it's there's so much competition with other sports. I do think that it fosters a natural pride and connection and interest in how and where our U.S. national team players are playing. And that manifests on a week-to-week basis with what we watch and what we say. And that comes from, keep in mind that our U.S. women's national team and our U.S. men's national team are the most popular American soccer teams. And even with MLS and USL and NWSL and everything, those still have, because of their long histories, those still are the most popular soccer teams. And that's not necessarily true in other countries and cultures.
Yeah, there's different ways to interpret this question. I view European club football entirely through the lens of Brazilian players, and I suspect Argentinians and Mexicans and other ethnicities view it the same way. So that's something Americans get criticized for on Twitter that I think is completely unfair. When you're talking about Leeds, and clearly you only care about them in the context of the American players there, and Leeds fans get mad about that, I would be the same exact way. In fact, I was that way when Rapinoe played for Leeds. So to me, that's not a uniquely American thing. I do think the United States, in terms of the way the sport is consumed, it's more country over club than it is in other parts of the world. It would be inconceivable to me for any American to say that they'd rather their favorite MLS team win MLS Cup than the U.S. win the World Cup. While in other parts of the world, you do find people that say, I'd rather my club team win such and such than my country win the World Cup. They're actually more passionate about their club teams. That doesn't exist here in the United States.
That doesn't exist here in the United States. But, this is who we are. And I don't think it's a problem. And to your point, the association and the connection with a player of your descent, of your nationality, that's human to have that type of connection. And that does happen. I mean, you look at some of the Asian cultures and the players that they follow, and to your point when it comes to Brazil. So I think that's a good thing, and that's a good pride to have. And in this day and age, where all of these teams are desperate and out there actively trying to cultivate that audience, that global audience out there, it should be no surprise that having a player of that nationality can bring in more eyes and bring in more excitement, and that those folks that are watching from sometimes thousands and thousands of miles away have an affinity and have a connection to those players.
That's it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, like I said, I got my one for the road. We'll talk a little Megan Rapinoe. Okay, welcome back. It's the end of our show, and at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. We talked earlier with Laken Litman about the U.S. women's national team and the news coming out this week about Megan Rapinoe, and this will be her last World Cup, and this will be her last year, and what she has meant to the sport. And, Laken talked a lot about how important Megan Rapinoe has been both on and off the field, not just for the U.S. women's national team, not just for the NWSL, not just for women's soccer, but for sports. And in doing what she has done, she has transcended the game. And so much so that you just mention her first name and you know what and who you are talking about. And so now she gets put in the pantheon of, when I say Mia, or when I say Hope, or when I say Brandy, or when I say Carly, you know exactly who we're talking about. When I say Megan, you know exactly who you're talking about. And so she has become bigger than the actual game of soccer itself. She is fearless, she is strong, she is interesting, she is engaging, she is opinionated, she is provocative, she is a badass on and off the field. And as I've said before, while I disagree and sometimes vehemently disagree with many of her opinions and her stances, sometimes literally her stance, I will fight to my last breath to protect her freedom and our freedom to be able to express ourselves and herself. And I like unapologetic personalities in sports. I like people with ego, and I like people with confidence, and I like people with conviction. She is and has been an incredible player. But also her level of fame and her level of stardom and the legend that she is, and that status is directly related to the image that she has cultivated off the field. And so while if you were putting together lists of U.S. women's national team players, if you just put a list of soccer players and the impact that they made as actual soccer players on the field, I'm not sure that Megan Rapinoe would be in my list. And so that would probably include the likes of Michelle Akers and Abby Wambach and Mia Hamm and Carly Lloyd and Hope Solo in terms of purely from a soccer perspective. But if you look at and put together a list of players that have transcended the sport and their influence on the game and on the world, I mean, you are talking Megan up there, and then maybe it's 1-2 with Mia Hamm, and then maybe Megan, maybe even Megan, and then Mia. And I think that she is going to continue on and parlay this incredible fame and notoriety that she has into some interesting things when she is done playing. You know, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking to Laken, the decision to announce this before the World Cup, I do think that that's a little strange. I do think that that is, in essence, making it about herself. This may be a victory lap when all is said and done if they were to win another World Cup, but this is not a victory lap until that victory happens for Megan Rapinoe or for anybody for that matter. And so I hope that it's not a distraction. You know, she, by all accounts, has been a wonderful teammate and in a substitute capacity has accepted this role and embraced this role. And at least outwardly looks like that's something that she is bringing a positive vibe to. But, you know, ultimately, this World Cup is not going to be about Megan Rapinoe. This is going to be about this U.S. team going for the third World Cup in a row, unprecedented, never been done men's or women's, and the players that are involved. Now, it could be about Megan Rapinoe if she is involved in it. But at some point, she will be. The interesting thing, Mosse, we were talking earlier about Alyssa Thompson and what she is as a player. At some point during this World Cup, Vlatko Andonovski is going to look down that bench and need something. And does he go for the 19-year-old speed demon, young phenom coming up? Or does he go for the retiring Megan Rapinoe? Completely different terms in players. One uses that speed to her advantage but has yet to really harness it. The other one, there's nobody better with the actual ball, but I worry about if it becomes a track meet or if that space isn't there for her to exploit. But ultimately, I want to say congratulations to Megan Rapinoe for everything that she has done, and thank you for everything that she has done, because she has made me think about things. And again, as I said before, I don't agree with her on a lot of things out there, but I'm glad that I live in a country that allows a Megan Rapinoe to be. And I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, the one question I wanted to ask Laken, and I didn't get a chance to, was where she would place Rapinoe on the list of all-time great U.S. women's national team players, which, to your point, is a tricky question because although she's a very good player, she is one of these athletes like a David Beckham, like a Derek Jeter, who we brought up earlier, whose level of fame is disproportionate to her abilities on the field. So sometimes you can lose sight of where does she actually rank just in terms of on-field stuff.
Well, some would make the exact same argument about me. So, I understand. Certainly, I was never at her level, and certainly never achieved her success. But the importance of, back then we didn't call it branding or whatever, but your brand and your image and the way that you portray yourself and the things that you do off the field and how that can enhance how you are looked. I can certainly appreciate and respect somebody that has done that and has done that better than many, many people out there. So, all right, it's going to be fun. Mosse, anything before we go?
That's it.
All right, listen, as we mentioned, we have one more show here in LA later on this week, and then we will be getting on a plane and heading off to Australia for the World Cup. We do have, as we also mentioned, a semifinal when it comes to the Gold Cup. We will be doing a pod, the final LA pod, on Thursday morning, so that should be out in your feed. Check that out going forward. And then once we hit the ground in Australia, Mosse, we're back at it, my friend. Day in, day out, daily content we're cranking out. And by the way, it's not just our State of the Union that's putting out content. Producer Sean and our whole team out there is just cranking it out. They did a wonderful job, award-winning when it comes to what they did in Qatar. And I'll finish the way I started earlier. Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? Don't care about the awards that you won before. I care about what you're doing right now. So we got a job to do coming up in Australia. And with the men and women that we have, I think we're just going to kick ass down there. Keep reviewing, keep rating, keep subscribing. To our friend Juan, keep watching, my friend. Check it out. All right, go to YouTube and check us out. We look glorious in color. We don't need Peter Jackson or anybody to color us with the technology that we have. So check that out. We will talk again later on this week. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.